Thanks for joining us. I'm Emma Reckenberg.
I'm Sean Kreisman. We appreciate you joining us here on this Wednesday. There's a lot of emotions on both sides. We're going to have a live report coming up in just a bit.
But first, new questions about the future of the Republican Party without Donald Trump in office. Joining us to discuss is former congressional candidate and U.S. Navy veteran Joe Collins, here with us to weigh in. Joe, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay, so a lot going on at the Hill right now, but this, of course, is leading many to wonder what the future of the GOP could look like. Republicans and Democrats, they appear to think that if they just get rid of Donald Trump, they'll also get rid of his supporters. What do you think about that, Joe?
I do not in the slightest bit think that's the case. I think because of the bravery and the boldness of Donald Trump, he's actually encouraged a lot of people to get involved with the Republican Party or want to be a Republican Party. I know myself, especially speaking for the Black community, there's a lot of men who want to be Republican because we don't see any avenue for us to be a part of the Democratic Party. The women supported the Democratic Party. Now it's time for the men to support the Republican Party.
Of course, as we looked in the 2020 election, Donald Trump was able to increase support among minority communities, and potentially part of the draw was the MAGA aspect of the party that Donald Trump brought to Republicans. And then, of course, you're also dealing with those more establishment members of the party. Joe, when it comes to actually winning here, winning elections, Republicans are likely going to have to bring all of those supporters together. Although they might be different, you've got the MAGA branch and you also have establishment. In order to win, you've got to bring everyone together. How do you see that playing out going forward?
Well, I'm a huge fan of term limits. So the establishment Republican is the Republican Party that is actually one of the biggest issues why people are not joining the Republican Party. We have to be open to people's ideals and ideologies, regardless of where they came from. And establishment Republicans do not create that type of opportunity. So in order for us to move forward productively, we have to start getting new and younger people involved in our party. And that means, removing, unfortunately, the established Republican and making an avenue for a new, younger, more vibrant, motivated Republican.
All right. So you're looking to a younger voting base. Of course, younger political candidates. You yourself ran. I want to talk to you, though, about what happened last week on January 6th. You attended the Save America rally. Of course, that was a peaceful event. And then we saw the chaos unfold as certain people decided to storm the Capitol. What did you make of what you saw during the peaceful movement and then what happened afterwards?
Well, we were listening to the president speak, my team and I, and we saw the police cars moving up and down the street very rapidly. So I told my team that it was time for us to get out of there. Shortly after, we are watching in the Congress vote on the president, and all of a sudden you hear people storm the Capitol. Then you hear that there were gunshots fired. You hear that somebody was killed, and our condolences goes out to those families of the people who were killed and injured. And, and then the mainstream media made it seem like it was 100% Trump supporters. And then on social media, we see the videos come out that you have congressmen that are opening up the doors, allowing people to come in. You have members from Antifa breaking windows and allowing people who support the president to come inside. So I think that it was an atrocity on both sides of the fence. You can't just blame the president of the United States for this. And we have to remember that members of Congress who are Democrats has been inciting violence throughout the country ever since President Trump has gotten into office. So this is something that we've been living with for a very long time. When you look at Portland, Oregon, when you look at Washington State, when you look at Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, we've been facing this for a very long time, and it has been incited by Democrats. So how can you expect people to sit back any longer and allow them to be stepped on by a Congress who is supposed to benefit the people?
Well, we've been covering all of the events that have played out in 2020, those almost 9 months of violence that we saw in those cities that you mentioned. And I think we played this soundbite for you and probably spoke with you about what happened after Democrat Maxine Waters made these remarks. But let's just play it again so everyone can have a refresher of what she said. Here's that.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
You push back on them. Tell them they're not welcome. Joe, those remarks could be seen as inciting violence. They could be, if you want to look at it that way, that certain words would come across that way. And yet there was never any condemnation for the violence that we saw over the summer months from Maxine Waters.
It never is condemnation for any Democrats. That's why, my team and I, we filed a House ethics complaint against Maxine Waters, because the words that she say are words that she absolutely lives by and she expects people to follow. But Maxine Waters is a prime example of why we need term limits. This type of idiocracy is what's been going on in the United States for a very long time. You hear from Nancy Pelosi. You even hear from, I guess you can call her future Vice President Kamala Harris or what have you. And this is the rhetoric that we get on a regular basis. No one ever says anything because they are Democrats.
Well, I know you ran in Congresswoman Waters' district, so perhaps you would are you thinking about maybe moving to a different location? Are you planning to try it again? What are your thoughts? I know you want term limits here, but first you got to get into office.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I hear that question all the time from everybody. Why don't you move to a more Republican state? Look, I'm from South Central Los Angeles. As a Republican, I don't feel that I need to go to another state in order to run and win office. I'm going to run right here where I was born and raised, and we're going to challenge Maxine Waters again. We're going to get in front of the recall Gavin Newsom effort. We will fight every single Democrat and Republican that want to stop us from making our country the best country that it can be. And we're going to fight to make our country better for the actual people who actually live here.
All right, so again, what's going on in the House right now, we're keeping a live look. The House taking the procedural vote ahead of a second impeachment for President Trump. Joe, stand by if you don't mind. I want to bring in our panel of the day. They're standing by. We have Anna Paulina Luna, a former Republican congressional nominee and also executive director of the ALP PAC. Also welcoming in Amber Athey, the director of the Washington editor, of The Spectator. Good to see both of you here. Anna Paulina Luna, I will go to you first and just ask you to react to what we're seeing playing out in the House this morning. Again, this effort to impeach President Trump for the second time.
I mean, we're seeing a complete disaster. These people are the same people that are talking about unity in America, and yet they're moving forward, trying to impeach the president as he has now, 7 days left. I think it's going to be backfiring, but what we need to know, what I saw on that screen right there, is pay attention to those no vote columns. Those are people who are actively choosing not to participate and choosing side on this. What we're seeing happening is wrong, and all of those people that are not engaging are also part of the problem, because when you see something wrong, you stand up to it. It shouldn't be happening. And what I tell everyone watching this show right now is get involved in local politics, because what's happening in our country right now is awful.
Amber, if you're looking in the nay and yay columns, you would recognize that there are several, maybe a handful of Republicans who would be joining in on those efforts, Liz Cheney being one of them. And that kind of goes to our earlier conversation about the future and direction of the Republican Party. Right now, it seems to be somewhat split.
These votes are a good reminder that all of these people who hated Trump from the get-go in the Republican Party and were very reluctant to accept his rise when he did win the nomination in 2016, is that these people didn't just stop hating Trump. They didn't just accept him and that his ideology was going to be the future of the party. They've been holding this in for a long time, and now that it's politically expedient for them to dislike Trump again, their true colors are showing. So these people were lying to you for the past 4 years about what they actually thought about this president. But the reality is that Trump's base is incredibly strong. It's not going to just disappear because they impeach him or because he leaves office. And so these people would do well to remember that when they consider the fact that they're going to have to run for office again in the future, and that in 2024, whoever decides to run in the GOP primary is going to be unsuccessful without that base.
I noticed, too, some early polling, again, looking to 2024, and we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. We're focusing still on the results of this final 2020 election. But looking ahead, it's Donald Trump who's at the top of the list, who appears to have the most support among Republicans. Clearly, Democrats are creating this effort to stop him from even being in the running. But, Joe, based on these polling results, and take them with a grain of salt, it sounds like the Republican base still does support the president.
Absolutely, and they should. The president, he was bold, like I said earlier. He got a lot of people excited to be Republicans. Now you have the establishment Republicans who are used to the same mediocrity, and mediocrity always holds people back. So the support for President Trump is never going to go away, and it's up to us young people to get involved in the Republican Party to change it to what it should be.
I want to ask another question to our panelists. Topic of big tech censorship. During this time, perhaps we would have some insight as to how President Trump is feeling when he's watching these votes being counted, the procedural votes ahead of impeachment. And perhaps he would be tweeting out his thoughts for all of these news networks to jump on and analyze and try to make sense of. But that's not happening at this point, Anna. And, it does make you wonder the role of big tech and the power that these unelected CEOs have over the American public with what information they allow and what information they restrict.
Oh, absolutely. This is coordinated suppression. And we're actually seeing now allies of the president that are now having their voices stifled as well. We saw that Ryan Fournier was actually locked out of his Facebook. He ran a page called Students for Trump. We see that Lauren Boebert is locked out until after the inauguration. So this is a coordinated attempt to suppress the American people and information from getting out. And if I may just add, the three Republicans that are actually voting to impeach the president, that would be Jamie Herrera Butler out of Washington State. That is a Republican seat that I do think that she will be primaried in 2022. That is Manchin out of Illinois, also a Republican seat, and then Cheney, also a Republican seat.
Yeah, a lot of people will be taking note. It'll be interesting, too, to see potentially which politicians Donald Trump would be endorsing going forward, just to see if it would carry any weight. You'd think it might. Joe Collins joining